Okay, we're live. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again once more for my Unplug and Play Facebook Live session. I think we're up to number 6 now. And this week I've got two, I would say, old friends, although they're not that old, but I've known them for quite a while. Jessica Lim and Tanvi, who I met I would say coming to 10 years, maybe 8, 9, 10 years. So I thought I'd bring them on for a chat because I've known them for so long, and I've sort of seen them when they were, early in their careers. 8 years ago, I think I met both of them at Angkor Photo Festival, and I thought it'd be a nice sort of conversation to actually talk to them about the choices they've made, and basically where the choices have led them to where they are today. So they're both now on Skype waiting. So I'm going to bring them in. Hi, girls.
Hey.
You're on Facebook. Oops, let me clear off one. Bit of a. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Tanvi.
Hi.
Hi, Jessica. Can you hear me? Jessica, your audio.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us this Friday night. I'm sure you guys have better things to do, I'm guessing. But it's nice to have you two here. So, before we actually start, right, I'm sure a lot of the people that will join us or will watch this later on once it's recorded will be people that know you, but then there might be some people that might not know who you are, right? So I'm kind of, let's get started with the formalities first, and maybe just do a quick introduction of yourselves. Maybe Jessica, you want to start?
Okay. I'm Jessica. I'm originally from Singapore. Currently, I'm based in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and I've been here working with the Angkor Photo Festival and Workshops. I've been director for the last 3 years, and before that, I worked in Singapore. I was a writer, photographer. I worked in Drik for a couple of years in Bangladesh before coming to Siem Reap. So I've always kind of been in media, and would just want to say thank you, Kevin, for organizing this lovely Friday shindig for us sad people with nothing else to do on a Friday night.
That was actually a very nice, fluent introduction, Jessica. Tanvi, over to you.
Uh, I don't know if I'm going to be as fluent as that, but true. I met both of you guys many, many years ago at Angkor when I had just kind of started out as a photographer, holding all the dreams of being a photojournalist. And over the years, the dream kind of changed and went over into curating independently, also became a part of a photography quarterly, which is not a quarterly anymore, called Pix, where we were looking at photography in South Asia. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been working with the Caravan magazine, which is a journal of politics and culture. And we give a huge amount of space to photography. So now I'm at the cusp of like back to journalism and photography, but kind of playing the role of coming from my art practice background, bringing it here and having those conversations. So yeah, gone from photo to curating and editing, and very happy to be here with you guys. The only form of socializing now seems to be like Zoom and Skype calls.
Well, it's the two introductions were actually very on point to one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to the both of you because I wrote down in my notes it's this is exactly what I wrote, which was a life in photography beyond practice, which is pretty much you guys both sort of summarized it in your introduction. You guys are very very much involved in this photo world of ours, and but you're not actually, you know, practicing at the moment. So I thought it would be a good sort of chat to have on a Friday night, especially for maybe some of our younger listeners who, you know, considering careers, choices in this field, and the immediate assumption is that it's always about the practice. You do photography, you bring a camera and you start shooting, and then you become a photographer, right? But you guys have taken very different paths. Maybe Jessica, since you started, do you want to talk about, because your first part of your introduction, you mentioned that you worked in Singapore and then you were a writer and then you were taking pictures and then, but that's like kind of way past, right? So how did that tell us about that part where you just decided to drop the camera and you know move forward without it?
I I really wish I could say that I sat down and I wrote a 10-year plan,
Yeah.
and I'm exactly where I planned to be 10 years, ago. But there was not a lot of planning involved in this. I think it was just that I was very privileged and very lucky that I was able to make choices based on what I felt like doing, which is not something that a lot of people have. So I want to acknowledge that. But for me, I think I was always looking for something challenging and different. And the truth is, the only reason I left Singapore was because I happened to meet Shaidul Alam in Singapore. I had actually interned in Drik for 6 months when I was doing my undergraduate in comms studies in Singapore. And that's how I got to know Drik at that time. And then after I graduated, I was working for a couple of years, and I happened to run into Shaidu in Singapore, who was there for a meeting. And he basically said that if I was interested, he had a job for me in Dhaka.
Wow.
And I think it was less than 2 months, and I was gone, basically, because it was exactly what I was looking for at that time.
So
I,
what was it that you were looking for exactly?
Well, I think that I've always been quite interested in social justice. I've always been interested in being involved in more advocacy work. And I didn't really know how to get involved with that at that time in Singapore. Now, actually, on hindsight, knowing what I know now, I think that there were actually a lot of things I could have done. But it's just so happens that that was the thing that fell into my lap. And that was the way that, the direction that it took me. So I always had a great respect for Drake as an organization and the values that it promoted, and it was the no-brainer for me to go back there. Um, but I didn't put my camera down until I was a year and a half into living in Dhaka.
Okay.
And at that time, it was just because I was working with so many amazing photographers. I didn't see how being a practicing photographer was adding any value to the industry. I don't think I was very good
Yeah.
at it, to be honest. And for me, it was more important for the story to get out, and it's not so much important for me to have the byline. Um, After a while, I mean, after you have one or two, it's nice, and then after that, um, but yeah. So I just kind of, it was a very logical thing for me to just phase myself out of it.
Okay. So actually, your early part of the days in Drik, you were making images as well for Drik.
No, I was doing it by myself. I didn't know how to get it out. I didn't know how to find photo editors. I wasn't working on proper projects that could get sold. I was just taking photos. There's a lot of things to photograph
Yeah.
in a foreign country.
Yeah.
As we can talk about that a little bit more later,
Yeah.
because everything is new and exotic and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But no, I was actually working in the picture library. I was handling the stock images that they had, doing some sales,
Yeah.
uh, stuff, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what about you, Tanvi? What was your experience as well? Because I do understand that when I first met you, you were kind of like still dabbling with practice, right? And then I think you got involved with the Delhi Photo Festival at some point. So why don't you share with us a bit about the early part?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, when I got to know about photography, the only thing that I really thought that one could do is being a photographer, because it seemed quite exciting, to be out in the field and meeting people. And that was really something that I was attached to, because I gave up a previous life and I was actually doing my master's in economics. And the things I was interested in there, which was, again, social justice, policy, welfare, studying inequality. I just didn't want to do it sitting inside a room writing papers. I wanted to be out in the field. And so I was like, okay, photography is a great way to engage. But I also find it interesting that you say that, like how we define practice, because like a practitioner for me is like goes beyond just the image maker, like I see my practice as having evolved as somebody who's like, I see myself being more of a collaborator now. There was a point that came about, which actually, it's just, as you guys said, it's about making choices and what kind of comes into your life at that point. And I also I'm really bad at making plans, of like looking ahead, and which is a huge privilege to be able to not plan ahead, So I just had a health issue, a back issue, where I was just told that you cannot be going out and shooting, carrying heavy equipment. And I was like, okay, my career is over. This was my dream. And, I fought my parents to leave economics to come into photography. And now it's like, I'll have to give it up. But a curatorial gig fell into my lap. I was like, okay, what is curation? And then that was sort of the beginning of the journey. And then, pics came about. So I kind of was very lucky to be offered things at a point of time in life where I perhaps didn't know that much. I would do those things very differently now if I were to go back. But I was lucky that they were offered to me. And then Delhi Photo Festival was happening, so I got involved with that. I think something more conscious that happened was coming into Caravan, because I think in the last 4 or 5 years, like my ability to articulate my interest has just become more defined. Like earlier, I knew I was interested in social justice. I was interested in certain issues, and somewhere where I really resonate with what Jessica said, that there was a point that came where you split yourself from, being the author, because I found it conflicting to do my own work and also promote other people's work, because I was always like, do I put my work ahead? Do I put somebody else's work ahead? And once I was freed of that, I find it quite liberating now. Now I see myself as a collaborator. So, whether it's curating, whether it's photo editing, whether it's working with a photographer on a book, whether it's writing on their work, it's such a privilege for people to open up their archives to you and be like, okay, let's find a form for it that works, where we can work together. And there are so many people who are better at making pictures than I am. So if you can kind of be, somebody who looks at the whole pool and be like, which are the voices that you can push forward? Because of the privilege that I have the ability to be able to, in my position, put some voices forward. I think I'm much better at that than being out in the field and making the story,
Yeah.
So
Great. But so was your first curatorial gig with Delhi, or was that before?
My first one was before. In fact, something that's in common with both of you is like a very generous Singaporean benefactor. I still don't know how he found me, but he's like, I would like for you to curate a show. And the only thing that he wanted was like for it to be an interaction between Singapore and India. And it had actually Sean Lee's work, Guan's work, and Carrie Lam's work. And Carrie was in my class at Angkor together when we were in Antoine's class. Sean, I also met in Angkor. So, how all these things really come together.
Yeah.
And so there were 3 Singaporean photographers and 3 Indian photographers. And that was I would say, my first proper show. That was before Delhi. Before I got involved with Delhi.
Oh, so you did the workshop the same year as Carrie.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
I guess the follow-up question would be, right, maybe to the two of you, since your relationship with photography has shifted, right? Has that sort of shifted also how you view photography? Maybe Jessica, you can sort of speak to that. I mean, especially Jessica, now that I know you've been at Angkor for so long, right?
Yeah.
So,
Like my view towards photography, you mean? How it has changed?
Yeah, back when you were that young girl with the camera to, wise Jessica now, after, you know,
Oh, right. I wish.
She's still a young girl, just without a camera.
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
No,
That was
no, well, I said
that
wise. I said wise. I didn't say anything else. I said wise, A much wiser
we,
Jessica,
we can play this back later and catch him on this. But, um, I actually wouldn't say that my main. I think that the main thing that has changed with me, if I had to go back that amount of time, it's not really specific to the medium of photography.
yeah.
It's more about the entire process of creating content. Because this is a funny story, but I remember in university having a very silly argument with my professor at that time, who's actually Charan George.
Yeah.
And I remember telling Charan George that I didn't care about the audience because it was, I was speaking from a position, again, of privilege. And I just basically told him that I was more focused on creating the work and I didn't really care who saw it. And I think he gave me this look. And I always remember this conversation that we had. And fast forward to today, and I think I finally kind of understood what he was saying. So right now, I think my focus is more about who is looking at the content that you're creating, whether it's photography or writing or film or anything like that, and who are you creating it for? Who gets to see it? What about the audience? And I think that's been the biggest change in me over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
do you want to speak on that as well, Tanvi?
I mean, I think as we grow, I can see that the ability to be able to put into words what you really want to do becomes sharper and sharper. So I would say that my understanding of the medium of photography has also changed in terms of when you at least when I entered, documentary photography was the first thing. Was the only thing that I really thought made sense. Because it's also, I feel, more accessible to understand. Photojournalism is more accessible to understand because it's with news events happening around you. But as I kind of, got more and more involved with the medium, I saw people's work who were looking at things that couldn't be established with, going to an event and photographing it. And I think now that's what interests me the most. Like, how do you make the invisible visible? Now that invisible can be like a community, or it can be an issue, or it can be something that like really challenges how we even think of the word viewing. And I always go back to someone like Laya Abril's work on abortion, which, it's a work on, the process of illegal abortion. How do you document illegal abortion? It's not a very exciting thing to photograph if you can't also photograph it because it's illegal and people are running away and doing it. But she made this spectacular work, which is actually visual research. So I think I'm not contained anymore by questions of like, is this photography? Is this not photography? I also feel that given that with PIX, we had this fantastic experience to be able to travel to a lot of countries in South Asia and going to places like Iran, and you see how people are using the medium where, there's a lot of manipulation. And then, I'm interested in the conversation after, being like, is this photography? Is this art? I mean, for me, that the boxes don't matter, but it's like, does it achieve to tell you a story that would otherwise be difficult to tell? So I think that way, that really excites me now. So I think I've just like grown, and I think now also my politics has grown, which impacts how I think about everything, including photography. So
Yeah, well,
Polit-
it seems like I think over the last 2 years, right, Tanvi, you've become like one of the voices that if people turn to the region and they want someone to speak on representation, whether it's West versus Asia or India. You're one of the voices that rises to the top. I think you've been a bit vocal and on certain issues, and I think you've been on a few panels like discussing the topic, right? So was that how was that something that how did this come about? Like yeah.
Sticky topic. But no, always happy to talk about it. But I think I always premise it by saying that I feel that the conversation around representation is always unresolved and always evolving.
Yeah.
And I just became interested because I constantly kept feeling that there were certain voices that were heard more and certain voices that were heard less. And what can one do about it? But now I realize that the more you get into this conversation, the more complex it becomes, and it's unresolved in my head. In terms of course, there are voices from the region that need to go out. I feel places like, and there are some other people that have done some great work. I think what Jessica does at Angkor of putting Asian photographers on the map, or what Nayantara does in Nepal in terms of what they built around Photo Kathmandu, what Shahidul actually, one of the first voices of sort of bringing this conversation to a world stage. I was interested in those ideas because there is a concept of social justice there as well, because I just feel that there needs to be diversity in the conversations that are being had world over to be able to actually have systemic change. But I also realized that more and more as I started to engage, like here I went to the World Press in January, and I was surrounded by people who I'd say typecast in terms of white male photographer who parachutes across, like white male wire photographer who parachutes across the world and makes photos, and there's a proverbial enemy all the time. But then when you have a conversation about the kind of work that has happened, you also realize that there are degrees and there are variations. You can't typecast a person into a box and say, we don't welcome you. And that's where it becomes more complex for me to be like, okay, so what do you do with the work that's created by these people? If it's valuable, do you still bring it into conversation, or do you not? So I feel that I don't know, I just became interested in it, but I also find it's like it's a sticky space to be in, and I like having the conversation, knowing fully well that I am very behind at finding a sort of a final answer. But I'm always kind of willing to learn about it from people as well.
Yeah, but it's not always necessary to have an answer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think throwing out a lot of questions is important.
Yeah.
To be able to ponder over some questions that I have definitely also not found
Yeah.
answers to, but yeah.
So Jessica, over to you, right? So you've been director of Angkor now for you just said 3 years, and it's like, wow, actually time flies, right? Because it seems like only the other day when we were talking, and then you got appointed. So it's been 3 years already. So that's fast. So
Yeah.
so how?
Did you know it's June,
Huh?
Kevin?
What?
Did you know it's June already?
Yeah, time flies,
Like-
I
right?
know, where did the year go?
So
Yeah. Okay.
So-
Anyway, sorry. What were you saying?
yeah. So
Sorry.
how has the experience been the last 3 years, especially given the fact that Angkor has so much legacy, right? It's been one of the longest running festivals, and a lot of the young sort of Southeast Asian in particular photographers look to it as their first sort of serious entry into their careers, right? So how has it been for you, sort of helming it the last 3 years?
To be very honest, I think that I kind of feel like I still work the same. So it's not as if all of a sudden the work's like it's not been a very big drastic change in terms of how I work. But yeah, I think that it's been a very steep learning curve for me.
Yeah.
I've been very used to executing on behalf of other people, and I think that I'm still till now kind of settling into the role of being the one who have to execute. or being the one to have to make decisions.
Yeah.
I think that is something that I never thought I would have a problem to do, to be honest. But it's harder than it looks.
Why is that? Why is that though?
Why?
Yeah.
It's the ultimate responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's your choice. It's your. You have to. There's nobody above you else. There's no one else left to blame.
Yeah.
You can't keep pushing the buck, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, also for me, I have pretty strong views on certain things, and I like to feel that I like to work in a team.
Yeah.
I think sounding boards are very important. I don't really want to, I don't know how dictators do it.
Yeah.
To be so confident that their vision is correct. I think that teamwork is a lot better. So in that sense, I mean, the festival has always been a very collaborative effort.
Yeah.
Even the manifesto that we have today, that's on the website, that was written by 13 to 15 of the committee members.
Yeah.
Collectively.
Yeah.
So it's not my thing. And I mean, and if you look at the history of the festival and the legacy, the people who started it and all that, I mean, this thing is a lot bigger than me. It's a lot, and it's going to keep going way after I'm out of the picture, I think. So I'm just dusting the house for now and keeping it clean. The next occupant, that's so yeah.
But
Yeah.
but how do you because I understand that this whole festival thing, and every year the financing and all that's always like a big question and concern that and I'm assuming that a bulk of the work that needs to be done in getting the festival up and running is making sure that you guys are resourced and funded, right? So how,
Yeah.
how much of that is still a major hurdle,
The money thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I've I used to really hate fundraising.
Yeah.
Because I never knew how to do fundraising without being a hypocrite.
Yeah.
I always felt like I had to lie
Yeah.
all the time to
Yeah.
companies or institutions, organizations. I had to make up shit in order to make them want to give me money. And then at some point along the way, I kind of realized that I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And the moment I figured out how to do fundraising without lying or being a hypocrite, I was okay with it.
Yeah.
I think there's also this.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Tanvi.
Tanvi.
No, there's this strange thing that I always associated with like work that's good has to be like, you can't make money but then there is somewhere like, good work you can do for free because one has done so much free work in the past, and that, when there is money associated with work, it's like, okay, there's something tainted about it. And I think the evolution comes at the point where you recognize that like, oh, there is meaningful work that needs to be paid for. And that if you can actually facilitate that process, then it becomes easier to like not have to. Because I completely agree with the hypocrisy bit where I guess at Delhi we couldn't raise money, and so like it just stalled.
Yeah.
But it's like we were also bad at it because all the photographers were used to working for free and nobody actually knew how to raise money. But the thing is actually get the resource to create the good, and that's always I've always found that quite interesting, that paradox.
Yeah, so I guess the next question to that would be how much of this part, right, has come into who you are now, where you are balancing the logistics, the practicalities of because basically a lot of what the two of you do is facilitation, right? You basically facilitate and make things happen, right? So for someone to be able to actually do that, right, I think you need a certain sort of balance of the idealistic sort of the idealism, and then also the practicalities and of what's in front of you, right? Tanvi, like I'm assuming you encounter this with your work in Caravan, right? Because actually Caravan, although they do very good critical stuff, right, it's still needs to run like a corporation. You have budgets you have to adhere to, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah, I mean, we always joke at the office that we're a bunch of freelancers who are sitting in an office. Like, we feel like a bunch of freelancers sitting in an office, and we, feel that we have like a big space, but we don't. I mean, the thing is, it's not a corporation. We're actually a very small set of people under 40 trying to create something that we feel can bring change. And I have to give this to the people who run, like my editor and other members of. Did we lose Jessica?
Yeah, I think she'll come back in. Don't worry. Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh.
I actually could hear you guys the whole time, but my video was frozen. But and go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I just have to give the people who dreamt of this idea, like 10 years ago, dreamt of something like long form coming into India. And actually, Caravan used to be a more literary space, and gave sort of, there was fiction, poetry, etc. And then the tide changed. We were overtaken by this really nationalist, hyper nationalist, Hindu nationalist government, and we had to respond to it. And the thing is, we're basically at this point just fighting for survival. And I think something like COVID has really sort of exaggerated that, because there are no magazine sales in the last 2 months. And we were already at the brink of like just about surviving, because we're a long form space. Our cover stories are like 25,000 words. Who reads that in the age of like Twitter character limit, So it's really about reimagination.
Yeah. No, because I was, remember we spoke last week, and you said you're right in the middle of going to press, and I said, wow, you guys are going to press right in the middle of this COVID lockdown, right? Because I was my guest the previous week was someone that worked in magazines in Malaysia, and the latest news in Malaysia is one of the largest magazine publishing companies just basically closed down 20 titles, boom, gone. So it's.
I mean, we're going to press, like we're still, we're getting the files ready, and we're hoping to retrospectively print.
Yeah.
But I think basically we see this as an ideological battle. Like however small we are, the idea is that you keep pushing the establishment to take note of what's happening. The establishment is trying to shut people down, and you keep pushing hard. And I have to say that we're basically sustained by our subscribers, but also by the generous contribution of everybody who works with us, because we always pay for the work that people do, but I always wish I could pay more. I always wish I could pay rates that like our photographers get from Western publications, but like we just don't have it. But photographers are also like, we want to work with you on a story, and then we give everything that we have for that story. So it's like, it's always a collaboration, I think.
Yeah.
So we're in survival mode, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jessica, right? You said that the decision was made by a committee, right? Right now, because I'm aware of some of the things that are happening at the festival. So do you think that committee sort of based, sort of very democratic, vote, and then this goes through, and I think it's a new format, right? This wasn't something that Angkor did before, right?
Not in 2018, I think. But I mean, the weird thing is that we kind of formalized it, but the truth is that over the years, I mean, if you look at the people who are in the committee, and actually we have an extended committee.
Yeah.
We have quite a few other people that I talk to very regularly who are not officially listed.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the reasons why we were able to do what we're doing right now is because over the years, you've kind of we came together because we have the same core principles, and we believe in the same thing.
Yeah.
And so once you have that kind of agreement in the group, we don't even really have to discuss it. I mean, the idea of being non-profit, the idea of being non-commercial, not ever up for discussion.
Yeah.
Not really come up, and which is very nice, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I may take that for granted.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remind myself now, actually, that it's not actually always that common to experience. But I kind of want to, want to go back to what Tanvi was saying earlier, because it's a little bit. Isn't it weird to hear what she's saying? I mean, like the magazine that she and her team are producing, it's such an invaluable part of society and our culture, and in any country, not only India, but this kind of publication, and for her to have to talk about struggling and having to look for donations and the rely on the generosity of people who get it, it's just really sad that we've come to this point, you know. And I mean, actually, I want to ask you, Kevin, because you're very involved with media in Singapore, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I think you know a lot of people. So, what have you seen in a society like Singapore that is so, you know, advanced when it comes to money and publishing and stuff like that, and the quality of publications, without naming names? I'm just curious, a little bit, like, I don't know what's going on in Singapore right now. I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, what? Well, I think you pretty much know what goes on in Singapore, right? The bulk of the media is centralized, right? So, and the latest statistics, the SPH and all that, they're not doing that well at all, you know. So the
In
trend,
terms of journalism, sorry, in terms of revenue, you mean?
yeah, revenue, audience, and all that. So they've been cutting their teams, right? So, but Singapore is a very small market, so at some point, you're gonna plateau. So unless it goes beyond that, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
If you look at media and what's sort of thriving, right? You look at certain YouTube channels, right?
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's kind of, I think a few YouTube personalities. If you look to look at it in that sense, they're kind of thriving. But if I look at like traditional sort of media companies, I can't imagine. Like my wife used to buy tons of magazines. I don't think she's bought a magazine in a long while.
Mm.
So
Actually, I want to raise something at this point that I came across a couple of weeks ago by a writer who was giving a talk at Google.
Yeah.
And I think his name is, oh no, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'm going to, I'll write out, it's Anand, and then the last name is very long, and I'm not going to mispronounce it at this point, but he's an American. He used to be the editor at Time, and now has a show on Vice TV or something. I don't really know. But anyway, sorry. The point is just that he made a case about large plutocratic companies like Facebook taking up so much of the ad revenue that it's almost, I guess, with enough research, we could probably see a correlation between the rise of social media ad spending and the complete destruction of newsrooms around the world and publishing houses.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, it sounds obvious. It sounded really obvious when I heard him say it, but I never linked the two together before.
Yeah.
Because of the monopoly that Facebook has and Google has on ad revenue right now, online.
Yeah. Tanvi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I mean, I think and sort of to extend that, right? Like if you can even see like what's happening with these large corporations and how they're responding to, like how Zuckerberg is responding to the Black Lives Matter movement, or like how he's responding to what Trump is saying. I mean, we've seen this, that how these organizations, with the amount of ad spending and with the amount of money that's going in, how do you control narrative? So it kind of comes back to, for me, always like how there is again like one agenda that keeps getting pushed forward, I think. And kind of to break it down, like, when we were talking about representation, like earlier there was a West versus East debate, which is still very important. But within our own segments, there are so many other complex debates that kind of come in, right? Like the haves and the have-nots, which is always the bigger debate in our own society. So like, what are the debates that like of Facebook, etc., will allow to go through, and Twitter and Instagram, and what are the hashtags that actually like get banned? And so much of our material, like we had a photograph from which basically was a poster of Burhan Wani, who was a militant commander who was killed in Kashmir. It was a poster in a street in Kashmir. Somebody took a photo of that poster, and Instagram basically blocked that photo for us. And we're like, why? Like, this is reportage. Somebody went on the street and saw that there was a poster of Burhan Wani on the street. So he's being celebrated by a certain section of society or a large section of society. We have to report on that. That's our job. And you're actually trying to censor us. So like ad revenues and censorship and controlling of narrative, it's like all very tied in, which is also like, what is it that populates our feed? Even at this point, like, how are we hearing so much more also about like what's happening right now in the West? And we should hear about what's happening in the West. How much of the news from here actually goes there? And it's very lopsided. So yeah, always something to think about.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Jessica?
Talk about this all day, I just find it really interesting because I don't really see the solution. I don't know the solution. I'm not going to be the one to come across it, but I am kind of very interested in this because it's the intersection of capitalism, censorship, authority. I mean, it's everything. Everything is coming to a head right now, and
I think I don't know whether this will have any sort of impact on this moving forward or whatever, right? But this whole COVID thing, right? This whole COVID thing that happened, right? Kind of started a lot of conversations as well because everyone's like shutting their borders, certain countries are talking about having travel bubbles, like Singapore is like talking to Australia and New Zealand. So it's almost like in a sense anti-globalism as well, because everything what you're talking about now, right? It's an effect of globalism, right? And at the moment when we talk about globalism, it's always the two global leaders that dominate, right? It's the US and it's China, right? But then this whole COVID thing, right? And in Singapore, for example, everyone's kind of talking about food security, blah blah blah. What's going to happen now if the COVID thing gets worse, and then we can't get our eggs anymore, So it's an interesting sort of discussion that I don't know whether it'll actually, translate into anything beyond what it is, whether people will start re-looking at what globalism means or free trade.
If you are I would say, and I'm going to try and say this without coming across as being, if we are in a position to contemplate that question, then I would say that we don't have to worry about it because we are already of the part of the population that's already very so-called educated and connected, and so I doubt very much that that's going to affect us. I never really travel a lot anyway, even when the borders were open, right? So I don't think that that's going to be the main issue. I think that right now what I'm interested in is also there's a lot of internally within each country, a lot of different things are happening. And so it's become like every time I talk to someone who's in another, like in India, or even depends on which part of India, and then in Nepal, and then every country is struggling with different issues that are coming out. I don't really know how to go and take a broader look at this in terms of global impact. Tanvi, you want to save me right now?
The one thing that I did think when you said that I don't travel much, it's like, yeah, everybody travels to you and Siem Reap, like one thing. But no, I mean, for me, the question of sort of, how it's going to impact globalization is or like, the world as we know it in terms of travel, etc., is a very later question. But I just feel that the way COVID is being used, I can speak for India, but I know this is happening elsewhere as well. It's being used as a smoke screen. It's being used, basically the pandemic has taken over all the conversations. So all of the polarization that was taking shape right before, at least in India and everywhere else, it's like, that news is being suppressed. So COVID is being used by dictatorial governments or like so-called democratic governments to basically repress a lot of other issues. And we see it happening in India all the time. So, I mean, India right now. And I'm worried for that, and I'm worried for, there's like a migrant crisis of like epic proportions that's taking shape. And then I'm like, I have the privilege to sit in my room and like, have this, they contemplate and have this conversation. So I think that's kind of the immediate worry of, how are we going to recover from this? How are we going to sort of move on from this world where everything is shifted so much for so many people? So the travel thing and the globalism thing is, it was already kind of happening, right? With the hyper nationalism, they were shutting the borders anyway.
Well, when I talked about like shutting borders, I wasn't necessarily just talking about the travel thing, right? It's about the trade, the exchange, it's more about that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I I can go on, but I mean, I just think that
the Frontline Club had a really funny online thing a couple of weeks ago, and they called the title of the talk, which I tried to watch, but it was like at midnight my time, so I was a little bit not quite there. But it's like, it's a good day to bury bad news. Was the name of the conference, and I think that's what we see happening. And I mean, we can kind of segue, if you don't mind, Carrie. I'm not sure. I don't want to.
Yeah, go on.
But actually, I just lost my train of thought. But okay. So one of the other things that, I mean, Tanvi, along with the not suppression, but maybe in some cases, I think suppression. In some cases, just simply because COVID is the main thing right now, the flavor of the day, so to speak. So a lot of things are being forgotten about or not being talked about, and and a lot of momentum has been lost, I think, especially in India. I think that you guys were working, it seemed that there was a really strong momentum going, and then everything just kind of evaporated, and everyone was, had to be indoors. But the other thing also is press freedom in the region. What an interesting thing to notice, country after country in the region, just figuring out that, they can utilize this time to fight fake news in the way that, legally with their digital laws and stuff like that. And then today there was a really interesting headline about, I think the last 3 days in America, 250 complaints of press harassment compared to 100 cases in 3 years before that. So 250 cases of police harassment in the last 3 days. And while I'm not in no way taking away from any of this fight that's happening over there right now, I went to the CPJ website just to remind myself of the global statistic of what, because in other parts of the world, it's not harassment. You go missing, or you get killed, or you are in prison. You don't get. I have to be very careful not to compare. And there's no right or wrong, and both things are wrong. But it's just what an interesting thing to observe from my Facebook feed. All this outrage for the last 9 days of protests in the U.S. when India was going through what you guys were going through, the only people I saw posting anything were Indians at that time, and now all of a sudden everyone is, and it's not, it's complicated. So
I'm really glad you brought, I'm really glad that Jess brought that up, because it's been something that's definitely on my mind as well, and where it just feels that, I mean, not just in India, but look at Bangladesh, and Shahidul also acknowledges this, that the momentum that he could his arrest generated was unprecedented from what I've seen. But it's he is that kind of figure. It's do you have to be that kind of figure for the world to take notice of your disappearance? There has been another arrest with Kajol's disappearance and his further arrest, but it didn't gain that kind of Lu Guang's arrest in China. So it's just there's always this lopsided nature of, what is it that picks up traction? And that's, I think, something really worth kind of observing, because for me, definitely there's so much harassment that's going on in the West right now. But I remember a month ago, one of the Kashmiri photographers that I work with, she just gives me a call one morning and she said, I just got a press note and I've been booked under a terrorism act. And I was like, what? And she was summoned to the cyber police cell the next day. And this has become a very regular tactic of intimidation. And there are so many people who have these are young photographers with terrorism charges against them. Like, how are they going to sort of, they have the sword hanging over their head now. And tomorrow, if they disappear or if they, if they get arrested, will this make world headlines? I don't think it will. I wish it would. But, and I'm interested in how that shift can be brought about. Maybe definitely beyond my lifetime, but you can try.
Yeah. But how much do you think? I'm just going to throw this question there. How much do you think that whole question falls on language as well? Because basically, what happens in the U.S., right? It's all in English, right? So everyone's kind of reading English, right? Whereas in India, right, for example, a lot of stuff that happens, right, people outside might not have as much context because they can't read some of the more intricate news that is coming out, right? Because I've got a lot of Indian friends as well, and I see a lot of their shares, right? A lot of the stuff I can't read exactly what, for example, the nuances of what is being shared, sometimes. So how much do you think that is?
I'll just say one thing on that is that I think this is years and years of sort of looking at the history of imperialism more than language, because I think that English has actually become a language that is very widely. English has been used very widely in India just because of our colonial history. And when we're talking about
I'm so sorry.
We have that in common.
Lucky, otherwise we couldn't be communicating with each other.
No, the more intricate.
Sorry.
So
sorry. Sorry.
No, basically, I think nuance is sort of a second step. Because I think a New York Times reporting on an issue happening in India versus, say, a Caravan or any other, I'm not trying to pitch my own institution, but any other Indian institution reporting on an issue here will definitely have very different levels of nuance. But nuance for me is a secondary thing. How many people in this world know about race and race politics and the history of race? Very, very important topic. And how many people actually know about the history of caste, which is actually in our society really pervasive and in South Asia. So, I know about race, but I don't know how many people in the West know about caste. So I think it's that. It's a history of imperialism versus language, because we, not just us, I think there is actually common ways to communicate the base, information.
Yeah. Okay, Jessica, do you want to have one last word in on this topic before we kind of move? No? So let's just go back. Let's just go. We kind of, this can go on and on, right? So why don't we steer it back to choices, and basically maybe Tanvi, if you can talk about your work that you do with pics, because I've seen, a few issues of pics, right? And can you talk us about the thought process behind each issue, and then I think what was the last issue you did? I can't remember.
The last one was called Personal Paradigms. So we were looking at the archive, family archive, but then it's expanded to be what is family, and not just doesn't have to be family like my parents, my grandparents archive, but families of solidarity, etc. So you're looking at archives. But pics essentially started now. It's 10 years old. We've done I think 17 issues or 17, 18, I forget.
17.
But 17.
Wow.
Yeah. And basically it's a publication, and we did exhibitions. The idea was to build an archive of contemporary photography in all of South Asia. And by our funders' definition, South Asia somehow includes Afghanistan and Iran, and I'm not complaining. It's good to have a ladder pot, I guess. But we had great funders. They said, travel to these countries, meet these people. You can't be sitting in India and taking out an issue on like Iranian photography. And we were like, okay, great. So the idea of Pix is basically we produce a volume. In no way is it kind of like the best, greatest hits of photography from this country, but like who's responding to a theme. And then we do an exhibition. But the idea is basically a resource center and a discourse space, which sort of has like come about. So now we do it like once a year because it's very time consuming, and it's like gone from 36 pages to now a 200 something page book. But yeah, so I really enjoy doing it because that's kind of it's work that's a bit different from Caravan. It's premised on photography first.
So for your last issue, right? What sort of work, or how do you look at the work, and how do you choose what to feature in each issue?
Oh, we have an open call.
For example, the archives.
Yeah, we have an open call. So we announce the open call, people respond, and we make the selections. We have a team of us, a wonderful team, like 4 of us, and then we make the selections. And then it's also like a text and photo interaction. So we select writers to respond to the work. So it can be poetry, fiction, script writing, etc., whatever they want to respond with. And we edit each of the works for the magazine. So the kind of works that were there, I mean, a lot of family archives, but also say there was one archive of an army man who was enlisted at the age of 22 to fight the 71 war. He was in the Indian Army. So it's like he was basically photographing his like fellow soldiers and their downtime while they were at war. And I've never seen something like this. Like, you know, it also forced me to reimagine the institution of the army, which usually, like, you know, I see as sort of synonymous with oppression and sort of taking away people's human rights in Kashmir, etc., and in Manipur. But there are people in there, and they have familial relations in there when they're out at war. So that's one. And yeah, it's all on our website, enterpix.ai, and go and check it out.
Okay. So Jessica, what about you? I'm sure like a few people be like curious to know what's happening with the festival this year. Do you have any sort of news to share or whatnot?
Yeah, we've kind of postponed the schedule a bit, so we will be opening for applications. We're going to launch the open call in about 2 weeks. But we'll shorten we used to open it for 2 months, now we just open it for a month. And then we are actually right now still in discussion about coming up with different variations of the program depending on COVID-19. Right now, you can't come into Cambodia unless you have 50,000 in health insurance, and so you know, so not quite sure. Sorry?
What's the situation like in Cambodia on the COVID actually?
Officially, it's amazing. We have very few deaths. We never had a full lockdown. Businesses are closed. A lot of businesses are hurting and have closed permanently, so that's not really great. A lot of people in tourism are out of work. But if you're registered officially, the government is giving you $40 a month as a welfare handout, so that's nice. And so right now the borders are kind of semi-open. You can come in, but it's not, assuming you can find a flight and have insurance and have a certificate that says you were tested in the last 72 hours and have no COVID-19, you can come in.
Yeah.
So no deaths. I think about 124 cases officially reported.
Yeah.
There was no widespread testing here.
Yeah.
In any case.
So is the festival postponed, or is it still going? It's going to be a virtual festival where you put us all on a Zoom call, and
we're definitely going to be having something. Whether I'll be seeing you online or face to face is another question altogether. But in any case, I think one of the things that we have realized. So I mean, the festival. I mean, Angkor value, like what you were saying earlier, Tanvi, is that you get to meet people and you get to be together. And when you take that away, or if we are not able to have that element, then we're going to need to be a little bit more creative in our programming to achieve as much as we can the same goal without that process happening. So we are coming up with, I would say, 4 or 5 different contingency plans on what that would look like. But also, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the global scene is going to be in November. I don't know if anybody wants to ever pick up a Zoom call or Skype call
Well,
after.
yeah. Yeah. We were discussing this last night, right? But I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest topics now that everyone's talking about is what the new normal is, and I think one of the biggest sort of sectors they're looking at is education.
Yeah.
That everyone's gonna it's gonna shift to this whole Zoom thing, this work, learn from home, decentralizing the school, sort of where everyone just goes to one place to learn. So that might be, I kind of believe that as well, that actually the new normal would be everything being, technology based. So
In places where technology is
yeah,
available.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
that's the that's the
yeah. That's
tricky-
always the tricky part, right? But I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
it'll move in that direction. Some parts of the world, faster than others, but it does look like that would be the way.
It's so
Yeah, I think-
sad though. Sorry, but what I remember from my school years is like the best thing to take away was the friends I made. It's like institutionalized education. Don't know if that really gave me that much, but like I love the friends I made and like the intercollegiate experience.
Yeah,
So, and Angkor is that, getting people together, the downtime, the conversation. I mean, this is happening today because we were all together in
yeah,
one place many years ago.
yeah,
I mean, there is a reason that people are lonelier than ever in this so-called connected digital age of social media.
yeah,
So that's definitely, I suspect that there are a lot of very, very good people who are developing best practices out there where you can actually do a Zoom call or online education. I mean, first of all, a lot of people are already doing it, and they have been doing it very effectively internationally. Workshops, long-term mentorship programs, stuff like that. So that's definitely a way to do it. But I also think that one of the things that you are able to do face-to-face, which is to feel the presence of the other person,
yeah,
to kind of take a breath with each other.
yeah,
You have to be a lot more deliberate when you are doing it online.
yeah,
Because you have to be a lot more conscious about wanting to do that because it doesn't come naturally
yeah,
through the interface.
yeah,
So, but I'm sure that people are going to figure this out. We're intelligent beings,
Yeah.
so to speak. But yeah, I think it's nice. I quite enjoy being forced to have to tackle this, to take on this challenge. I think it's good, and in the long run, I mean, it's you're right. We should always have an online presence anyway. I never had to. I was always focused on the festival face to face, but I'm very grateful that I now have the opportunity to develop this part of what we're doing. So in the future, we'll have both,
yeah.
which is nice.
And, and the two of you, right, when we had our meeting, when we had our quick catch up yesterday as well, right, the two of you were saying that you guys been spending a lot of time at home and then in doing this COVID thing and then thinking about where you guys are and, reminiscing and thinking about what's the future. Do you want to, Tanvi, do you want to, and you sort of, nodded your head when Jessica sort of said that as well, right? So, do you want to give us some reflections as well on this whole time that you've been forced into sort of lockdown and
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also a thing of like simultaneously feeling like, oh, one is getting old. Maybe I should plan this time of like what's gonna happen in the future. But it's just given me some time little bit of time because it's not like working from home gives you I think the boundaries between work and non-work are it's sort of completely obliterated. But yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about like what would be the best course forward in terms of like, is it going to be in the curatorial world? I'm not sure. I'm now sort of deciding between, do I want to go in for like a really academic PhD and, leave the world of photography, or my 10-year dream of like opening my dog shelter. So I guess the longer I'm in COVID, maybe I'll figure
You know
out
what?
my dog shelter. That's my, if I die without having a dog shelter, I will die an unhappy person. So it's between those two for now.
I actually think that there are a lot of people in our industry who want to do cat cafes and animal shelters. This is a new like business idea, because I told Kosuke has agreed, I is supposed to provide the catering, and he agreed in principle to do a cat cafe because he's from Japan. And then now you're doing a dog shelter thing. I see a business opportunity.
I know, we should talk. It's like, meet me outside.
What, what about you, Jessica?
I want to work in your dog shelter.
What about you, Jessica?
I just told you I'm going to work in a dog shelter. No. I'm enjoying. I mean, I really hope I get a couple more years to work on this festival. Assuming yeah. I'm feeling very challenged. I am
Yeah.
doing a lot of new things, which is what I need. So I'm very happy with this right now, and just to try and take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
fingers crossed, and then replace myself. Which is
So what would
you have to do that. Yeah. So I think that's really important to plan your replacement. So I don't know how that's going to be, but I think I can't. I think that's important. Yeah.
so
Think about that.
so Tanvi has the dog shelter in mind, aside from the PhD, right? What do you have floating around your head?
Me?
Yeah. Once you've replaced yourself, in the eventuality, at some point.
That's a very good question. I actually, it's not really much of a stretch to say that I might really end up opening a shelter as well. Or
Yeah.
I know I'm not just saying it, but I have thought about it. Because I always wanted to be a vet. Never had the courage to go for it. Go back to school. I did think about going back to school, but couldn't decide what I wanted to specialize in. So I suspect that if I ever come across that, how Tanvi, I don't know, like this kind of stuff you can't force, right? It's just
Yeah.
one thing you just know, and that seems to be the way things work.
Yeah.
But I just know. I think that's the time I'm going to go back to school. But now, if I do it, I'll be forcing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I think. And also, I would like to start exercising more regularly.
Yeah.
That's
If you
very,
say
uh,
if you
very
say that to the world on Facebook Live, then maybe that will be, step one of motivation. Admitting yourself.
yes, yeah. What else is there? Yeah, I'm so sorry. I can't answer that with more.
No, that's fine.
Uh,
That's fine. So one of the questions I sort of put here as well is because I think we started our conversation with how you guys started, right, and then where you guys are now. So one of the
yeah.
questions I've actually written down now is, so what is there anything that you guys have learned over the course of your careers, right, that might be beneficial to a little Tanvi now listening to this sort of, or Jessica now listening to this sort of conversation, probably like Tanvi doing a workshop in this year, at work at Angkor, and then now she's listening to this, right? Because you've done your time, you've gone through the journey, and I'm sure you guys have learned quite a bit, whether it's a serious piece of advice or something that just happened, a memorable experience that sort of shifted the way you think, or felt that it's something that someone else could benefit from, learning or hearing. Tanvi, do you have anything at all?
Jessica goes first. She always put me
What?
on. She always puts me on the
Oh,
thing
okay,
first. So you go.
okay, Jessica, you go.
Uh, I think mine would be
Okay,
stop.
okay, maybe let me phrase the question for you, Jessica. For me, right, Jessica, I feel you've made very sort of brave, determined choices, right? You feel like, to me, you come across as someone that knows what they want and uh, sort of what you stand for or what you believe in life, and then you make your decisions based on that, right? So maybe you can start answering from that perspective. What has guided your decisions, your choices, and the choices you've made, and then a reflection on those choices.
Did you hear that? Did you hear this like selfie question that he just asked me? Oh my god. Um, I would. It's yeah.
Okay, what?
No. I
Yeah,
actually have a lot of things to say. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
don't really know what appropriate thing to say.
yeah.
So that's the thing. So I would say I have 2 points. One would be in terms of advice, would be to tell myself, the younger version of myself, to stop overanalyzing and thinking so much and stop talking so much and just do it. You know, like less talk, more action. Put your money where your mouth is, basically, because I think that's what I did a lot, and I still am guilty of that. So there's something I like to work on, even now. Just do it and stop making excuses for why you can't and why you no, just shut up and do it. So that's one thing, and then I think the other thing is also for a younger version of myself, it would be to be very aware of the story that you're creating about yourself in your head. Because we all have this image of ourselves and what we think we are, what we want to be, and all that. And very often, I think that it takes us a very long time to realize that that's completely wrong, and it's actually very harmful to have such a fixed story about what things are, and so just to be more open, to allow the possibility of things to happen, and to be yeah to allow to be wrong yourself to be wrong, basically. And that's what I would say.
You mean more specifically to accept a certain flaw that you might have identified? Is that what you're trying to say?
No. I think it's like, for example, I think this is might be a very Singaporean trait, and I'm definitely overgeneralizing.
Yeah,
But I think that very often young people get very stressed out about what they think that they should be or what they should do or the path they need to take, and then you go down that path, and then 15 years later, you kind of don't know how the hell you ended up where you are,
yeah.
and you realize that whole thing was wrong for you in the first place. And so my thing is, just don't be so married to the narrative that you have created for yourself. This idea of your identity is not as fixed as you think it is. It's pretty fluid, and it's never set in stone. So you can be a different person tomorrow if you want it to be. And I think that if you really understand that concept, which I'm still figuring it out, you feel a lot more freedom and really start to do something that you're really good at. And when you do something you're really good at, you contribute to the world and society and culture in general, because you love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So today you still feel that who you identify with is still shifting.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah,
And I think I hope so.
yeah.
I don't check myself as much as I should. So I thank you for the question. Oh, really? I sincerely, like, it's good for me to check in on that. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Tanvi?
Wow, I want to. I'm like really glad to get that advice from Jessica to an older me also. Uh, but I would just say don't take yourself too seriously. I always felt that you have to do this like big thing all the time. Like you have to create the story, you have to be the author, you have to be the photographer telling the story about this issue in India, or like, and I think a lot of it maybe also comes from the kind of society that like we grow up in. Like there's so much emphasis on like merit and like doing well at school and doing well in college. And now looking back, I was like, I did okay in school, but like it doesn't really impact my life now, So don't take yourself too seriously. And once you kind of let go of that aspect, you allow yourself to grow a lot more sort of organically. I think the one thing that I've really benefited from in my life is like take chances, take risks, because until you take a risk, you actually like a whole new world won't open up to you. Like if you keep going in like status quo, kind of happy, kind of unhappy, but but if you take the risk to, maybe you'll fail, but sometimes maybe a whole new world will open up. And it kind of brings me back to something, Kevin, that you were saying, that when you first met me, I was like sitting in a corner and didn't really say much. And even though I would still do that in like a large crowd of people. But I think my confidence has grown a lot because I'm now doing something that I really love. So when you do something that you really love and you believe in it, then you're able to kind of, stand for it and take it forward. So find what you love, and that can actually be a evolving process,
Yeah.
So take chances.
But what's one example of a risk that you've taken, for example? I mean, just without like getting too deep into it. Yeah.
I think everything in life post my colleges has been a risk. I come from a family of academics, so my dad still won't admit it, but I don't think he was really happy about me doing photography. So I think my first risk was leaving. I left a master's degree at London School of Economics and just like landed up at some photo school being like, hello, can I work in your lab? And so from then to land up here, that was a big risk. They're like, who the hell are you? And I was just like, I came all the way from India. Can you give me a job? And they're like, okay. So it was a big risk that I actually may not take now. You're a lot more measured now, Early 20s, you're much more like a renegade. So, yeah.
And back to your sort of options, right? Is there what is your sort of thinking about a career in curation? Is that something that is a really a viable option that presents itself within the context of where you are and where possibly you might want to go, especially from your background, from the photography, and then
viable?
What is your thinking?
I don't know which career in the arts is going to be viable in terms of anything. So, I don't know if it's viable, but I think something I've benefited out of doing is doing multiple things, which also excites me. So I curate, but I also write, and I also sometimes I edit for a book, or I sometimes teach, conduct a workshop. And I think for me, it's like, to be viable and to be relevant is to evolve with the times. So whatever the time demands of you, you respond in that way, which is, I think, why I'm at Caravan right now, because I think this country needs me, but I think it needs more people to be there with like idealistic institutions that are sort of pushing the mainstream current. So right now the time calls for this. I'm sure the times will change. I have hope. And then there'll be something else that one moves on to.
Well, do you think the question to the two of you is, do you think the world needs more people like you, where you start off in photography, but then you don't you branch out into other areas where you use what you know and what you've learned, right? The visual literacy and the history and all that, and then apply it to other fields, like in magazine work or other sort of civil sort of society functions or whatever.
I would say that more people in the world need to be afforded the opportunities that we have.
Yeah.
Been afforded, and then they can decide what to do with it.
Because the question sort of it goes back to one of the questions that a discussion that I had a long time ago with the guy in Indonesia, which runs the journalism school, and then each year he churns out like 60 to 80 students, and only sort of three of them or four of them actually have a career as a photographer. The rest of them like
Right.
get filtered out into society doing different sort of jobs, and he was perfectly fine with that because he felt that the education that they got going through, you know, foreign journalism and all that stuff sort of made them better sort of uh, better members of society, for example, doing whatever they're doing. So do you think,
Right.
yeah,
Hmm. Um,
for example, okay, Angkor now, right? Uh,
yeah,
each year, how many students do you guys? 100, about 100 students?
each year? No, only 30.
30.
Oh, 30, yeah, 30. Okay, so 30, right? Of the 30, right? How many of them actually eventually sort of, based on the past few years, how many of
Mm.
them sort of
I
stay
we
within the field, or how many of them kind of like move on?
sent out a survey to the alumni a couple of years ago, and I think it was approximately half.
Half, okay.
I think I
That
remember.
stay in the industry.
Yeah, either full time or part time.
Yeah,
But Kevin, I mean, I really have to say that I disagree with the premise in the first place because I don't think it's. I think that you can. I mean, the question that you have is like about whether or not you're able to put a label on yourself that yes, my current career or my current profession is a photographer, but what if you happen? I mean, it's kind of like I don't think photography. Yes, it is a career. It is something that you can do to make money. It is technically a profession, but
yeah,
it could also be a lot more than that, And it's about storytelling. It's about empathy for others. It's about interest in your society. It's about or even wanting to share bits about yourself. So I don't really know how to answer this question because I think that there are a lot of photographers out there who might not feel like they can say they are a photographer because they don't tick the right boxes to put that label. But then now we're going to have to discuss what does it mean to be a photographer,
yeah.
and I don't think we have
Well,
enough time for that. So,
yeah,
yeah. So I don't think it's important in terms of numbers or statistics. I actually am not bothered if people come for the workshop and then decide that they want to do something else with their lives, and because I think that with any profession in media, especially, it's it's about the ability to connect and understand and empathize with people, and if you can take that skill set and apply it in any field that you want to,
yeah.
even if you're opening a cafe, you could be like the barrister who's the best listener in the world and change people's lives that way.
Yeah,
Like
well,
so.
yeah. Well, that's kind of that was actually kind of what I meant. Uh,
Right.
that someone that goes to the workshop or goes has an education in photography, right? But they don't come out and they don't practice. They don't take pictures for a living. But then
Right.
they might end up in a job as a communications officer in an NGO, for example. So they aren't actually taking pictures, but they're using their, as you said, empathy, right? The empathy for others, and applying it within that sort of framework. So that was
Yeah.
what I meant. So I'm bringing this up because I'm trying to sort of suggest that maybe someone listening that if they get into photography, that is not the only path, that you go out, you do your education, you do workshop, and then you come out and then you got to run around with your camera, right? There's other sort of avenues for you to sort of
Right.
practice whatever you've learned.
Yeah, and I also think that right now we are also confusing passion with money,
Yeah,
and that's going to make things very complicated because I think that there are a lot of people out there who had to stop photography because of money,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they couldn't have been professional photographers.
Yeah.
It's just, that's just a technicality. So how are we going to start? Yeah, that's complicated.
Yeah, that's a complicated question, right? Because there's never really one answer or another, right? Everyone has different situations in their lives that force them to make
I really
choices,
like
right?
that idea,
Yeah.
Kevin,
What?
of like hidden photographers everywhere, and you don't know,
Yeah.
like one could be. I like that. Like, or like not even photographers, like artists,
Yeah.
hidden artists, just lurking around every corner. You just don't know who,
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
No, because based on my experience, right? Because I've done these visualizing social stories workshops, right? Tanvi, the last one I did was with Tanvi in India with Robert,
Right.
and if you look at the most of the people that are there are not photographers, and I've done quite a few of these workshops, but they are very much needing the skill sets of a photographer, whether
Right.
it's in their communication, and sometimes they have to go out and do field reports, and part of the necessity is that they make images, and then but the photographers aren't going into these sort of non-sexy sort of non because these are very non-sexy sort of professions, I would say, right? Because it's a lot of like field work, it's like probably a lot of paperwork, it's not probably not as exciting, yeah.
Oh no. So I hope nobody from that sector is listening, because.
No, I mean,
But
in the eyes of
no,
a
but
young, impressionable, photographer who wants to, go on adventures and stuff, it's not, it might not be so appealing, right? Yeah.
Then
yeah,
they are they are tourists with a camera. They're not a photographer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's that's just what I was gonna say. That I think like the thing is getting people to be interested in reading images and reading the story. It's like the story is like, what do you have to say? Some of and I see a lot of people that are interested in photography not being photographers, and I find their perspective to be really amazing. Like I read recently this piece by Maza Mengiste, this I think she's Ethiopian, but I could be wrong, writer, and she's writing a fiction novel that is built on photographs. Like her characters are engaging with photographs, but her research was based on archival photos from the Italo-Ethiopian War. So she was reading those images and looking at like representation in those images and how like Ethiopian people were shown in that war, and like that plays out in her fiction novel. Now this is somebody who can read photographs and they're interested in the story, and she herself mentions that first when she saw those pictures she's like, oh my god, they're so beautiful, and then later she kind of like knocked herself on the head being like, don't be fooled by the beauty of this, like look at what's happening in the photograph, like, and then she kind of started to deconstruct it. So I think that for younger guys, it's like, see what the photographs are telling you. And there are many ways to carry that story forward. Like, you don't have to be, you can be a photographer, you can be the author. But the most important thing is the story. It's like, what do you have to say and what are you pushing forward? And you can be like, actually, you'll be much more, I think, maybe sometimes satisfied to not have to make money from photography. Just do it for the love of it and, have another job. But that's also a very high privileged space that you dabble both. So
Yeah.
That's all I had to say.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share, Jessica, about the festival or whatnot? I think you got some festival people coming in now.
Oh, I don't have the Facebook open, so I don't know.
When is the open call? When are you guys putting up the open call? You said you've pushed it back a bit.
In 2 weeks, so approximately mid-June. Yeah.
So that's that's still for the workshop, right?
Yeah, that's for the workshops, and then we'll have other things, but that would be more towards August.
Okay. And
so,
and
yeah, you need to have stay tuned. IPA will tell them before I do. So yeah.
And are you guys having the same sort of tutors, or are you guys changing some names around, or Is it same as last year?
Well, assuming everything is, if we find the vaccine tomorrow, right? Ian is coming back.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
He's coming on.
So,
He's coming on next week. He's gonna have a chat with
oh,
Yeah.
he has an exercise station in his house. If you'd like him to do a fitness video,
I
it could go down well with the audience, some section of the audience, and then, yeah, but anyway, I'm gonna be in trouble. But yeah, so stay tuned. I have last words, but Tanvi, do you want to?
Do I want? No, you go ahead.
No,
need to say.
I think. Well, Kevin, you say that people will watch this eventually,
yeah.
right?
We rack
So
up we rack up about like 1,000+ views in a week's time. So actually quite a lot of people watch it on this Facebook page. Yeah.
So then I just wanted to say that for all the people out there who are right now struggling and
Yeah.
fighting and feeling like everything is taking too long, I think that I came across a quote today that I'd like to share because it was really good.
Yeah.
And it is by a feminist writer from the U.S. And she said, "Revolution is not a one-time event," and that made me think about it. That's been what I've been thinking about today. So yeah,
Who said that? Like, what's the writer?
I'm not going to pronounce it.
Lord.
Audrey Lorde.
Lorde.
Audre
Yeah.
Lorde, yeah.
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 I was going to say Lorde. Okay, Audrey Lorde.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the word that I would want to hold on to, because it feels like you fight the fight, and then there's so many people out there that are still fighting in the fight, and then there's COVID happens or like repression happens or something, but there will always find inspiration in people around you, and I feel that I want to just kind of reach out to whoever's listening. I feel that this has also been a tough time, I think, mental health wise. It's really taken a big toll. I definitely have had some very bad days and kind of feeling really hopeless. But I think the power for me lies in community, and the communities that we've built in person all these years actually are coming through. Even seeing you guys right now, it just feels so familiar. So reach out to the familiar, and actually there are more people struggling. The more you talk about it, the more familiar that struggle will feel, and maybe it won't feel so big anymore. So yeah, keep the fight going on.
But
Keep the going.
But I think the mental, Tanvi, you bring the mental health thing, and I think that's actually a big thing that's probably not being talked about much, the whole mental health thing, because of course the physical struggle is very obvious, right? But because you see it, right? But I think a lot of people are going through a lot of mental health issues that aren't very visible.
I just think of 2 days ago, one of the girls who was in my workshop in Kashmir, she'd come over and she was in Delhi during this lockdown, and she's like, "How's the lockdown been for you?" And I said, "It's been okay, but quite stressful, but I think I'm quite privileged because, I have a home, I have shelter, I have food." But I felt almost embarrassed to say that I've been quite stressed. And she said, "Oh, is this your first lockdown in your life?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Now you know what it feels like to constantly be curfewed." And I was like, that really kind of put things into perspective, and almost like all these stories that we've read and done around mental health, say in Kashmir, suddenly made sense in a way. I don't think that I can in any way compare my situation to theirs, but it really kind of put things into perspective that if you look around, there is a lot of struggle, and empathy with that struggle helps me lift myself up sometimes. So yeah. It's hard for everybody in different ways, but keep the bigger picture.
Are you still gonna do the workshop that you did the last time? I think last year, 2 years ago, you did that wonderful workshop.
That was last January. We were gonna do another version this Jan or this, I mean, last December. But then Indian government basically has kept Kashmir under curfew since last August. So I couldn't really go. I mean, I could have gone, but things were quite tense, and then the pandemic happened. So maybe we'll do an online something. But the thing is that I will do another round of the workshop, I'm sure. But the good thing that has come out of it is that I've built these relationships with them. So now we work together, we talk when things are tough, we exchange books. One of them brought me biryani the other day, and I was like so overwhelmed. So we have a relationship now, and this relationship will take shape in various ways. I feel both ways. Sorry.
Where is the workshop held?
It was just a workshop for 6 Kashmiri women photographers that I did in Srinagar with Sanjay Kak, who made this book called Witness. So I conducted it and he organized it. I was really fortunate. I really got to know Kashmir in a way that I've never have known before this. So yeah, it's an ongoing process for all of us.
Yeah.
Learning.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we've gone over time now, and I think we've talked about things all over the place. I think there's a lot of meat that I think people will sink into. I think it's nice to see that there was a consistent number throughout. Some people left, but I think there was a consistent number who just stayed through the whole conversation. Okay, so thank you so much, guys. Take care to the two of you. I wish you guys all the best, and I hope whatever was shared here, especially your little piece of advice at the end, probably someone resonate. Oh, yes, Jessica?
I forgot to say, because just for the photographers out there, I'm collating a list of COVID-related projects, not necessarily directly about COVID, but anything that is connected to directly to COVID. So if they want to just send that over to me. It's not an open call. I'm just a mini research project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway.
Tanvi, have you got any open calls as well, or
We're always open. So send whatever you want our way. We're always open for submissions. And also open for anybody that wants to support us. I will put in a support pitch also here.
Yeah, well,
but no, feel free to write to me whenever.
I mean, does Caravan take pictures? Pitch.
Pictures? Oh yeah, of course. We take pictures all the time. So photographers should feel free to write to us. Sometimes it's not possible for me to respond to every email, but I try. I have a sticky note on my computer, being like, try and respond to everybody.
And you guys have published feature stories as well, which is photo driven, right?
Oh yeah. We do photo driven stuff. We do a photo essay every issue. We do current reporting as well in photos, and then we pair up photographers and authors a lot of times, and then they create a work together. That's happened once recently. Shomo Shankar Bose from Calcutta did it. So I mean, I'm actually open to any kind of new ideas. If somebody has like something really, something that we haven't done but up their sleeve, feel free to write to me, and we'll see what we can do about it. I can do it in Caravan or outside Caravan. There are always ways.
All right, cool.
Jessica, I will contact it for later.
Jessica, what about exhibitions, slideshows, and all that? Is there anything to talk about there with regards to that part, or that's still being decided?
Yeah, I can't announce it yet, but we have 3 guest curators this year, and all 3 are female Asians. Tick.
All 3 are what? All 3 are what?
Sorry. Women. Actually, okay. It's a bit of a coincidence, but yeah, I'm ticking the gender box by accident.
Okay.
Now I just have to check one of them belong to the LGBTQ community, and then I'll have all the boxes checked. Guys, I'm definitely joking right now. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I think we've gone about an hour and a half. So thank you so much. Thank you to, let's see, Kenji, Kosuke said I'm still here. Suchi, Lee Kuen, thank you all guys for joining us. And you guys have a enjoyable weekend ahead. Don't think too much.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, Tanvi. I'm not sure
I'm
whether
gonna go have that drink.
Tanvi. I'm not sure whether we kept it light because actually you kind of said, "Oh, let's keep it light." I think it was borderline light. I'm not sure whether.
Borderline, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I should have had my drink on the side to keep it lighter for 2.0.
But yeah, thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna end the session now. Bye.